Good evening, everyone. My name is John Taves, and I'm the event coordinator here at McNally Robinson Booksellers. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge, of course, that the land on which we gather is located in Treaty 1 territory. That's the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Nanaak, Anishinaabe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, the homeland of the Red River Métis. In addition, of course, McNally Robinson Booksellers itself rests on the land once occupied by the Métis community of Worcestertown. We're delighted you could all join us here tonight, both in person and virtually. We are, of course, gathered here today to celebrate the Winnipeg launch of Decolonization and Me by Kristy McLeod and Phyllis Webstad. We're so enormously grateful to Métis Publishing for putting out this incredible book and, of course, for making this evening a possibility. I am the last person anybody wants to hear from this evening, so I'm going to turn things over to our incredible panel over here in just one moment. But before I do, I have some brief housekeeping notes. So there will be a conversation that'll take place to my left, and that'll be followed by an opportunity for all of you gathered here to ask questions. So please do allow those to percolate over the course of the evening. When it comes time for questions, I'll approach you with this microphone, not because we don't trust you to project, but just to ensure that everybody watching at home can hear your questions as well. I'll be back at the end to go over some signing details, so please stand by for that exciting moment. We have so many of Phyllis's books here in the store. They are really just a cornerstone of so many sections here. And this is a book that ties together both a national conversation and all the incredible work she's done so far, done, of course, in collaboration with Kristy McLeod. And when you have a chance to read this, if you haven't already, you'll see that the dialogue between the two and their just incredible collaborative approach makes for such an incredibly valuable and rewarding reading experience. We're thrilled to have this book on our shelves as well. I now have the pleasure of introducing tonight's participants. So immediately to my left is, of course, Sean Carleton. He's a settler historian and professor of history and Indigenous studies at the University of Manitoba in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Treaty 1 territory. To his left is, of course, Phyllis Webstad, Northern Secwepemc, Shuswap, from the Secwepemc Haikto First Nation, Canoe Creek Indian Band. She comes from mixed Secwepemc and Irish-French heritage, was born in Dog Creek, and lives in Williams Lake, BC. Today, Phyllis is married, has one son, a stepson, and 5 grandchildren. She is the founder and ambassador of the Orange Shirt Society and tours the country telling her story and raising awareness about the impacts of the residential school system. And immediately to her left is Kristy McLeod, a registered Métis with family roots in Lac Saint Anne and Red River settlements. She is currently a PhD candidate in curriculum and instruction, exploring Métis identity. She was chair of the Education Committee for the Métis Nation Victoria and a director at large on its board since 2021. Her focus in all things she does is to recognize the value of diverse perspectives and the importance of consultation in creating unity. Please give them all an enormously warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much, John, and to McNally Robinson as well for having us here tonight. And of course, all of you folks, in your orange shirts, you look great. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here in Treaty 1 territory at McNally Robinson, spending your Saturday night with us, and we really appreciate it because tonight is a celebration of the publication of Decolonization and Me by Kristy and Phyllis. And also want to thank Métis Publishing for putting out this really timely and important book. So I'm just going to say a few words and then pass it over to our very special guests. But it is a true honor to help launch this important book and be in dialogue with them this evening. As moderator for tonight's event, I'll mostly just try and stay out of the way, like John was saying. And let Kristy and Phyllis share from their book. And then ask them some questions to spark more dialogue before opening it up to you folks and having a really great conversation. And then, of course, you'll have the opportunity to purchase the book and meet the authors and have an opportunity to chat with them. But as moderators prerogative. To kick things off, I just wanted to say first, congratulations. Writing and publishing books is hard, but nights like tonight make all the hard work worth it. The sharing of ideas and truth about truth and reconciliation and colonialism, as the book's subtitle reminds us, is a key part of healing Canada and ourselves. So congrats, but also thank you. The act of writing and publishing a book like this is also an act of courage and bravery, of speaking personally to the hurt and harm of racism, of residential school denialism, of colonial violence, and how difficult the personal journey of decolonization can be. In these difficult times, books like this can guide folks looking to take on this work themselves and give us lessons about how we can do that in the best possible way. And I learned a lot from reading the book. I've had the very deep privilege of reading earlier versions of the book, and it's just such a wonderful read. And I think, like myself, if you pick up the book, you'll learn a lot about how to carry on this work. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it with my students. But before I ask you some questions to get our conversation started, I wanted to invite both of you just to offer some thoughts now that the book is out, why you think it's important, and what you're hoping to accomplish with the book. So I'll turn it over to Kristy and then to Phyllis to share some thoughts now that the book is out in the world. It's a real thing. You too can read it and connect with it, which is a nice feeling, I think, as an author. So I'll turn it over to you folks.
Yeah, so for me, the beginning of this book really began with a desire to help people understand, especially those people that were ready to open up their minds and their hearts. And I think that it was a challenging book for me. It required me to revisit my own family trauma. And yeah, so I'm really grateful that it's out there. And I also, with that, have excitement that others will have an opportunity to learn as an educator. That's very exciting for me. But also the hesitancy around sharing some personal stories and how people will understand those.
I feel like I need to just do an intro first.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So Wade Hohueda, Phyllis Webstad Rensquest, So what I said was, hello to everyone, I'm Phyllis. I'm from the Kennew Creek Dog Creek First Nation. I'm Shepparton or Shuswap outside of Williams Lake, BC. And I thank you for allowing me, Treaty 1 and Métis, for being on your lands today to be able to talk and to do this important work. And I acknowledge survivors that are here and their families. Survivor introduced herself earlier, so I know that we at least have one fellow survivor here. Is there any other survivors here? Families of survivors, I always like to know who's the families. Yeah. So I acknowledge you, thank you. What was the question?
Given you the opportunity to talk about why you made the book, what you want people to understand now that it's out there.
Well, I've always challenged what, is there any kids here? What pisses me off and what scares me. And this is one of the things that was upsetting, was seeing the comments on Facebook and seeing things on social media and on TV and having my family being upset from what they see on TV and phoning me and crying in some instances and not knowing why people think they're liars. And so I collected screenshots. I have a collection of them in the hopes of someday addressing them. And so when I pitched that to Teddy, and then he hooked me up, Kristy and I up to tackle the denialism and the incorrect attitudes and behavior, well, the attitudes of people that are saying things. And so I just wanted to do something. And that's one of the things I learned about researching decolonization, like what the heck does that even mean? But one of the things is standing up for what you believe to be true. And I'm like a deer in the headlights. You come at me, I'll be quiet. And I'm not sharp like that where I can come back with something. 2 hours later, I'm ready to,
Had a snack, I thought about it a bit.
Person's long gone by then, and I'm all ready to have a conversation. So I need to think about things for a while. And so I thought about it and came up with some of the screenshots and some of the history backing why those things are incorrect, and just having a conversation about it.
Well, thank you both for taking on that hard work in such a personal way too. For those of you who pick up the book, it gets into a lot of heavy subject matter, but it approaches it from a personal perspective, which is very accessible. It's very disarming. All of a sudden you will realize that the book is half over and you've been sitting there for hours because it feels like having a conversation. And I suppose that was maybe one of the first things that I wanted to ask you folks is why the conversation idea? Why have more than one person write the book? Why is it important to have multiple perspectives on a lot of these issues? That you're collaborating really on helping us understand a lot of these issues. So why is it, we often talk about reconciliation as a relationship. Of course, relationships have more than one person. Books are often written by one person. Why have multiple perspectives? Do you think that way of writing, what does that add to our understanding and awareness?
Would you like me to go first?
Yeah.
So for me, I have a very strong belief that conversations are a place of great learning. And even if I hold a different view from someone else, in a conversation, we can find those common points, the things that we may share that we agree on. And even if we don't agree on very much, that begins a place in a relationship where we can begin to build and begin to discuss and understand one another deeper. And there are times perhaps that we may never agree, and that's okay. I believe that conversation is an opportunity for me to learn and grow, and for anybody else who's in that conversation to learn and grow. And this book for me was an invitation for anyone to enter the conversation, no matter where you are on the healing journey, on this journey of truth and reconciliation. It's an intention to open up the space, provide opportunities where we can all engage.
You're here, yeah.
What Kristy didn't tell you is that she's a teacher, and the book is laid out. Maybe she can talk about that later. The way that it's laid out is on purpose, and I can tell you, if it was just me writing the book, it wouldn't be out for another few years. So it was like collaborating with her and just, yeah, it just started last November, so it's been very, very quick, and having the conversations, and we, what is that, Google Docs? Is that, yeah, so just being on Google Docs and making changes, and what about this, and what about that, and yeah, so it was good to collaborate, and it's my first time doing that. And you'd think it would take twice as long, but it didn't. Cut the time in half.
teamwork makes the dream work, is what they say, right? But it also ensures that you both add your strengths to what makes it into the book. And I think that collaborative writing certainly is a growing aspect in Indigenous studies, and making sure that that through that collaborative process, right, that important truths can be shared. But also, I talk a lot about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's final report with my students. It's really important. It is also the 10th anniversary of the release of that report this year. But what I find how many people have read the Truth and Reconciliation report? Okay, quite a few of you. We're talking to an audience that maybe know. But I think a lot of students that I talk to walk away from that overwhelmed. There's a lot of information. When they get to the calls to action, many of the calls to action are the government will do this, the government will do that. And there's not necessarily the same awareness of what can I do as a person, as an individual, as a community member. There's almost the personal touch. People have a hard time figuring out, okay, I now understand why reconciliation is important, but I'm not exactly sure what I can do about it. I don't feel personally called. And I think one of the things that this book does is think about that personal response to truth and reconciliation work. And you mentioned the structure of the book. So perhaps I could ask Kristy to explain a little bit about why the information is ordered in the way that it is, and then I've got some other questions about that.
Well, first I'll speak to what Phyllis said about how we began the book in November, if you don't mind. Yeah. And it was something I felt like just had to happen now, and it needed to be out there. And so it drove me and Phyllis to move forward as quickly as we could to get this book out, to help people, because so many people want to know. They want to know what they can do. And so that was the intention. And the format of the book, really, for me, when I think about truth and reconciliation, it's about healing. It's about healing ourselves, and it's about healing a nation. And for me, so I took that idea, I played with it, approaching it from the idea of what does it mean to heal? So I use my own personal experience. I do have some lay counseling background, and I use that idea around, well, when I'm on a journey of healing, where do I begin? And I usually begin in a stage of denial. I don't want to do this, like, no thanks. And so I either ignore it, and I was talking about this metaphor earlier today. It's like a pot boiling on the stove, the denial section here. I keep shoving the lid on, but the heat's still there and it's building, and okay, once in a while the lid's part of me. The lid blows off a little bit, a little of the steam comes out, and then I shove the lid back on. So that stage of denying is almost, unless we start letting the steam off and take that lid off, then it's gonna blow, right? Because it'll just keep building inside. The pressure will just keep building. And so for me, that first chapter really, that first part of the book is really addressing denialism and denial and what that looks like. And for me, then the next stage of my journey of healing was beginning to acknowledge that something happened. And so that stage of acknowledgement isn't really about bringing it into my heart yet, but it's in my head, and I'm acknowledging that, yeah, okay, some things happened. I haven't yet experienced it in a body way, in an emotional way, but it's there. So that's the next portion of the book. And then the next portion is about accepting it and really trying to figure out in my heart, what does that mean? What does that mean to me, and how do I move forward within that? And then the final part of the book is about moving forward together. So what does this look like collectively? How do we walk this path? And then within each of those parts came my teacher. So when I go into the classroom as a teacher, I set up the students for learning whatever we're going to learn. And so Phyllis and I provided questions that we often get asked that really, if we're educated, they won't be those questions anymore. So those questions that at the beginning just kind of set people up for that particular portion of the book. And then the information. So then we start to share factual information that's been researched and is backed up within the book of things that have happened. But integrated within that, I think that when we connect hearts, when we're learning, that's where true learning happens. And so we share our stories, our personal stories. And Phyllis and my experiences as Indigenous women in Canada are quite different, but there also are similarities. And so those personal stories are where I try to connect and to make it real for people. It's not just factual information. This is real things that affected real people. And so the intention of our collaboration, like you talked about, was that each of us gives our stories to provide that kind of sense of this is what it could look like. And then and to end each portion of the book, each part of the book, there are reflection questions. And with my students, I always, at the end, we sit after we've been learning, often our discussion, often the learning portion of where the knowledge is being shared is done in dialogue and discussion. That's kind of how I do it. And so at the end, we sit and we reflect. What does that mean to me? What did I learn here? What was important? And so that connection is made for the student or for the reader. And so this is the setup of the book throughout the entire book.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when I was thinking about how I might use this, for example, teaching, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's goals were different. It was to establish the truth. Decolonization and Me invites people into how they can learn that truth in a different way. And I think that personal touch is so inviting to the reader. It allows them to confront how they feel about the truth as part of this healing journey. So thank you for approaching it like that. I know that students, and as I was reading it too, you feel much more connected to it in that way. So as Kristy was saying, the book is divided into 4 different parts: the denial of truth, awareness and acceptance of the truth, facing responsibility for truth and reconciliation, and lastly, moving forward on the path of healing together. I think many will be familiar perhaps with elements of parts 2 to 4. But part 1, the focus on denial and denialism, right? Those that seek to downplay or minimize or distort residential school truth and story. The hate and the racism that a lot of people who do this work face. It might be new to some people, but you start off with it. You start with that hard part. And so perhaps a question for both of you to reflect on why it was so important. Some people will say, why would you include that? Why would you talk about the hate and the mean things that people are saying, the bullying, the intimidation, the harassment? Why start off in that way? Why not just focus on the acknowledgement and the awareness and the education and the moving forward? Why do you think this is one of the first books to really foreground what is happening to survivors and people who do this work, the kind of hate and negativity that people get, everything from racism to death threats. And talking, I think, openly about that is an important step of where we are 10 years on. And you're among the first to do it in print in this way. So perhaps talk a little bit about why start there.
Well, for me, because it pisses me off. So I do presentations all across Canada. And if there have been deniers in the audience, they have never revealed themselves to me. I've never been face to face with a denier, but I've seen their comments. I know they say don't read the comments on Facebook, but I read the comments and I screenshot them and I keep them and I file them. And because that tells me the work that's yet to be done in this country towards Indigenous people. And not everybody has a computer or a laptop, or speaking of my own family, the elders in my family, a lot of them don't know this is going on. My aunt, she lives on the reserve, she has APTN, and she has a phone, and that's it. And she's one of the ones that was quite upset when she seen on TV saying that the deniers saying what they were saying. And so it was important to me to speak up and to address this. And the work that I do is in response to the late Murray Sinclair's challenge to Canadians in before the TRC report to keep the conversation going after the TRC wrapped up. And that's what I've been doing, what the Orange Shirt Society has been doing. And this is another example of that, is just keeping the conversation happening on all aspects of the Indian residential school system in Canada. And I endeavor, I guess, to understand the denier mindset, because I know we aren't liars, and there are people alive today who have brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles who didn't come home. And I always say the story is this long. And for the missing children and unmarked burials, there's a process that needs to happen. The first is to identify what's going on. And then of course, the end part would be some resolution of some sort, whatever that may be. And with the deniers, it's like, it's just started, but yet we're expected to be over here already in only, 2021, 4 years. And I know there's one woman in our Secwepemc Nation that has an uncle that didn't come home, that is still on the grounds of the St. Joseph Indian Residential School. She wants to bring her uncle home and give him the burial that he deserves. And she says to say to any deniers to send them her way because she needs help. So instead of putting the energy towards that, help figure it out. There's only a handful, there's 139 residential schools of the TRC and even more that weren't recognized by the TRC. And only a handful of them have been searched. So the process has only begun. And I had the opportunity to be in Kamloops because they're part of the Secwepemc Nation, and talk to my sister Roseanne, who's the chief who made the announcement of the children. And I asked her about deniers, and she said she doesn't give it, she doesn't go there with it. And but what I got from our conversation was that there is a lot more going on in the background than you'll ever know, and a lot of it is none of your business. And yeah, it's gonna take a long time to deal with that. There's a lot of nations involved in every residential school. They came from everywhere. There's a lot of beliefs and protocols and culture that needs to be followed and respected. And yeah, so, and there's even Canadian and Canada and provincial regulations regarding repatriation and rules. And so there's a lot going on. And she even talked more about what's going on, but yeah, so to be over here and to be expected to be here already is unrealistic. To have that expectation, and expectation is a premeditated resentment. And I think that these deniers have that resentment that, that's not happening in accordance to their timeline. And yeah, it's gonna take a while.
Can you repeat the question?
why spotlight the issue of denialism as a starting point?
Thank you. Listening to Phyllis, my brain was going all over the place of things I could talk about. I think that what we don't know, we don't understand. We need, the more we can bring that into the light, the more we can discuss it and have conversation. And so like Phyllis said, in my family, the racism was definitely faced, and all of these things were known, yet we didn't talk about them anywhere outside the family. And I think that knowledge is power. Education, the late Honorable Marie Sinclair said something like, education is what got us into this mess, and it's going to be education that gets us out of this mess. And so the more that we can address these things, the more we can help people understand. And I believe that the more people understand, the more they will educate others. And it becomes this ripple that goes out until there will be very few deniers left, I believe, because we'll all be standing up and saying, no, this is not okay. This is not right. And so the more we can share and talk about it, the better off I believe we are. And within the book, as been shared, if you haven't read it already, we took, both Phyllis and I, screenshotted these negative comments, because I think sometimes people don't understand how awful they really are. There was one comment that's in the book, I can't remember the whole gist of it, but basically it was about a man and his child, that he was going to have his child wear a white shirt on Orange Shirt Day because he was going to make a statement through the child. And so for me, poor child, number one, but also what a lack of understanding. Like, it's not about conflict. It's about understanding and sharing this knowledge with one another. And so in the book, we take those kinds of comments and we try to explain why this is so important. We try to give the reason and we try to help people understand how to respond to those types of comments. Because I think sometimes, especially, and I can remember when I was younger, people would say those things and I would be angry inside. And then, like Phyllis said, there's a saying, a parking lot crier. I was a parking lot crier. You know, everybody's saying goodbye, they're all having their feelings, and then they all drive away. And I'm like, bye everybody, bye, see you. And then I stand there alone and I cry. That's me. And so in conflict, it's very similar for me. And I'm learning now to have voice. And I hope that this book helps other people to understand how they need to have voice also and educate each other.
Yeah, and thank you to both of you for including that, because it is difficult to read, actually, some of the comments that are included. But it is a common experience. If anyone's had a conversation about truth and reconciliation with someone who doesn't know a lot, you might experience that. And in order to move forward, working through some of that and figuring out how to have those conversations in meaningful but productive ways is so important. The Truth and Reconciliations Commission's formula was actually quite simple. First, we have to have truth. Truth will lead to healing and justice. Healing and justice will lead to reconciliation. The issue is that denialists know that formula very well and actually want to keep us stuck in the truth part so we don't have to do the healing, justice, and reconciliation part. So if we're truly 10 years on, committed to figuring out how to continue our momentum on this, we need to find ways to have those conversations with people who would rather not believe, because it brings up all of these difficult feelings. So approaching it from a conversational perspective, but one that is also inviting as many people in to think about, why do people say this? Why do people respond in this way? And how can we move forward? I think that was a really important addition to the book, the way the book is structured. Okay, I want to get to our audience questions, so just a few more from the peanut gallery, just warming us all up. I am a historian at the University of Manitoba. I see a history shirt in the back. So I, in particular, appreciated the attention paid to history as a key to healing, of learning from the past to guide our healing today. So the TRC talked about the need for historically literate citizens. This is one of the things they talk about in the reconciliation volume, that we need more historically literate citizens. And so I wondered, how you came to the idea of making sure that part of this healing would be historically grounded in helping people understand the history, not just about residential schools, but you learn about a number of different things, from the Indian Act to colonialism as a process generally to 60s Scoop. There is a lot of historical work being done in this book to make sure that when people are having these conversations, they're doing so from a historically informed perspective. Why was history so important to you both in this healing journey?
For me, I'm coming from, not from a history professor stance, but from a healing stance. And I'll speak about myself, my history makes me who I am. It's all woven together, it's all my experiences, it's everything that I've been through in my life makes me who I am. But so that the more that I know about those pieces, the more that I can understand myself. And then I'm going to take this metaphor and make it bigger. So the more we understand what happened, the more we can truly look at what needs to be done to heal this piece, what needs to be done to move on and have justice. And so this is part of the reason that we really wanted to make sure that this book brought in those, you can tell I'm Métis, brought in those threads and wove them into something that is more aligned and comprehensive, hopefully, for people. And it needed to be embedded completely in fact-based information so that it couldn't be, well, it still can be, but it would be more difficult for people to say this was not true. So this book is got at the end a copious amount of resources, because every time we make a statement about something, we made sure that it was backed by facts. And perhaps they are facts that people won't accept, but they are facts. I really believe that that piece is how we threaded in the historical, hopefully literate people that will leave this book.
Life can be understood backward, but must be lived forward. That's what I live by. My healing journey started in 1994, and I've been on a self-reflection, learning history, learning what does it mean to be Shoham, and just doing everything and anything to learn and heal and move forward. And oh, it's hot in here. Yeah, my brain went. What was the question again about
why ground the work in
historically the history, yeah. It's looking at our shared history, yeah. When I speak and tell my story, I also include historical components of that to make the point that I'm making. And one example of that is the Indian Act. After one of my books came out, I was telling my aunt, why were people so mean to each other? Because I took some of the stuff out of one of my books, Beyond the Orange Shirt Story, that my aunt had talked about and written, and I wish I didn't now, but it was violent. And her response was the Indian Act. It's like, what does that have to do with that? Like, didn't make sense. But what she said was, great granny was born in 1876. The Indian Act came in 1880. So great granny grew up being bossed around by older white men, Indian agents. And a lot of them, because you couldn't kill them, you couldn't fight back with the government. So what did they do? They turned on each other. Lateral violence still happens today. And So like that's a simple teaching of the Indian Act, of what it's done to our people over the generations. And there's a lot of just simple little things like that I use the history to talk about why it's like, why it is the way it is today. So yeah.
I think it's also, I talked a lot about how the book is so personal. And yet I was reading it thinking, oh, okay, I'm gonna look at the resource for that. And I think a lot of people who are having these conversations want to learn about this in a way that is more personal, but that is also fact-based. Like you've done both with this book. And I think people will walk away informed. But also my last question is that I think it's also that people will walk away inspired and feel very hopeful. So a lot of people will say, or a lot of teachers I hear will say, students will talk about residential school burnout. They learn so much about this. It's so heavy. It is really difficult. And that as a barrier, or sometimes even being used as an excuse to not be part of this work. But you end the book in hope and grounded in hope that people will work through these different parts of the work. So why end on hope? Why was that an important decision to talk about your own journey, but in a way that offers readers of the book hope that they can do this too?
Yeah, I can say that's a privileged view. We live this every day, and the impacts of it are with me every day, and I don't get the option to leave it somewhere or drop it off, or so hope is very very it's the light at the end of the tunnel, and there's so many examples in my life of hope. And one of them is my grandchildren. I have 1 son and 5 grandchildren. My grandchildren are the first in 5 generations to be raised by their mother and their father. Mom, granny, me, and my son didn't have that. And what a difference that's going to make. They are growing up to be who they were meant to be. Again, the late Mary Sinclair's quote, which we as survivors didn't have the opportunity to grow up who we were meant to be. We've had to be on a healing journey. And there's hope. In April of 2026, we're having an event in Vancouver at BC Place. Those that were in kindergarten in Williams Lake and other places in 2013 are now graduating in June of 2026. So they have had K to 12, and I just got the chills, which tells me that the ancestors are here, that they've had K to 12 teachings of what happened to us, and they have empathy, and I have experienced that in classrooms. And so we're gonna have these events for 4 years. We'll be having one here in Winnipeg, probably in 2028. And just to put Canada on notice that this new generation, I'm calling it a stepping stone on the path to truth and reconciliation in Canada. And 2027 will be Calgary and Toronto. And then I also want to go to Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, Halifax. Again, to have conversation and talk about this new generation coming up. I have great hope with them that they will be the ones to make the change that we can't even fathom right now. And I look forward to 20 years from now when the hair is all gray and I have my cane and maybe a limp and my back is hurting and I'm walking and going into a classroom or a college to talk and to experience something that I never knew was possible. And I don't know what that is, but I have great hope that that's going to be the case at some point, if I live to be that long, that next 20 years, but yeah.
Yes, so for me, many things give me hope, and we really wanted that to be a part that was woven into the book. Although hard, it's hopeful. I hope for people to read. I know for me, in those darkest moments of my life, a person or something has happened that's a glimmer of hope that moves me forward. And I think I like Phyllis, I'm getting chills throughout, and I know it's not the fan. My ancestors are here, and that reminds me of why I have hope, because my ancestors could not have sat here and talked like this, openly about this. My grandfather, my father, they could not have done that. So I'm very hopeful and grateful that I have this opportunity to do this. And when I go into classrooms with children, then I remember this is hope. This is going to change the world.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, I think healing is hard work. And this book is, there's a lot to guide us on that journey. And I want to thank both of you for being here and for writing this book. And we've got a chunk of time to take some audience questions. If you'd like to ask Kristy and Phyllis a question, John will circulate around and pass the mic. And
thank you. My name is Belinda Vandenbroek. I'm a Gilbert from Pascrag Cree Nation. I'm 77 years old. I went to residential school for 10 years. I was 9 when they came to get me, and I have absolutely no recollection whatsoever of leaving my home, going to the train. I remember getting to the train station, and then arriving at the school, big school, staff dressed all in white. And I thought I was going back to the TB sanatorium because I've been there when I was 5 years old for a year and a half. And apparently I fought like hell with everybody that came. And I was not going to leave that bus to go in that place. And no recollection of that happening either. And I, for the naysayers, the deniers, my suggestion would be that I would like to see them go to Ottawa and spend at least 6, 7, 8, maybe 9 months, maybe a year, and read all the documents that talk about us having to go to these schools for 100 years. 100 years. Can you even fathom that? Probably not. So decolonize, my favorite subject. I'm telling you, anybody that's ready to talk to me, I'm here anytime. So for me, decolonization is rewinding. We have to rewind all the stuff that's been taught to us up to the time that we went there. By the way, my mom and dad went there too. They went to the old Mackay School at Big 80 Reserve, where I lived and was born. Hello there, Jesus, good to see you. Anyway, sorry, I just
making connections on a Saturday night.
Yeah. But anyway, so she knows because I went to came to talk to her football guys. Anyway, yeah. So I'm very passionate. I am very truthful. I am not scared to tell you the truth, and I'm not scared of any questions either. Okay, so just know that. And this. I haven't read it yet, but man, I probably stay awake all night tonight because I want to know everything there is about it. But I have been doing workshops on the effects of residential schools from the 1990s. And I sobered up in 1975, so I've been sober 50 years. And when I did my step 4, little did I know that was the beginning of my healing journey. And so my life is in my control. No more is there going to be a government telling me how to live my life. Not only that, but you all need to know the history, you guys. Honestly, there is no white act. Okay, just in case you know that. We have the Indian Act that has guided our lives for over 100 years. So our history is very different from the rest of Canada. And we are treated very differently in our homeland. This is our homeland. I was talking to some people yesterday, And I was saying, you know, you are descendants of the original people of this country. So stand tall. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But because of the separations and disconnections from who we are as Indigenous people to this homeland, the people on the street, 11,000 children in care, that didn't happen just a couple of years ago. That started from way, way back when we began to be disconnected from who we are and our families. Our family was the most important thing in our lives before contact with other people. And that was discombobulated big time to 2025, and it's still here. So I'm very passionate. I will talk anywhere to anybody, and if you want me to come talk to your class, right there.
You're signed up already. Yeah, great.
Good, Jen, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Were there any questions?
Hi, thank you both so much for being here. I'm just thinking, like, colonization is a much bigger and broader subject and residential schools is a big component of that, but how would you engage that subject? I think talking to kids especially, because that's a good way to kind of keep it simple and break it down, because sometimes adults can make things too complicated. But how would you explain to, and residential schools are because you can use personal stories of children, are a good way, as you said, to kind of appeal to people's hearts, because sometimes just, you know, throwing facts at them, they don't, you know, it doesn't do that. How can you talk to people about decolonization, but people that maybe not reading a ton of history, but are open in a conversation?
Maybe I'll begin by explaining that in the book, we set up the context before we start talking about what actually the terms mean that we're using in the book. And so it begins with a rationale of why we're doing this book. And then it goes into, for me, which I totally forgot at the beginning because I was nervous, introducing ourselves. We should introduce ourselves so people know who we are and where we come from and who we're connected to. And so we do that before we go into the terminology. We talk about sort of a general kind of idea of why this is important. This book is not just about residential school survivors. It is about that, because that is a very big piece of what we need to explore and we need to find justice for. But it also is about all other things as well, like the 60 scoop, the land, the treaties, and how the Indigenous people were treated within these treaties and still continue to be treated. So many pieces are included. And so I think that to colonize is huge. The ways that we were colonized all over the world were very diverse. But this book is really looking at decolonization and what that means with regard to what happened to Indigenous peoples in Canada and why we need to address that. And why, just let me think here. I think that for children understand justice. They understand when people have been treated unfairly. All we need to do is give information. This book is not for small children. It's not intended, other Phyllis books are very much intended for small children, and they're very well received. And what I see is, hopefully this is a progression. We begin with some more simple topics that small children can understand. Your orange shirt being taken away the first day of school, your special, whatever your family gave you, being taken and never seeing it again. Children understand this, they can connect to this. And so we begin with these stories and we progress through the years with adding more and more information until this book, and there are many other really good books on this subject, but this book is an offering to, you know, those older, perhaps grade 11 and up students and adults. And so it isn't going to cover everything. We can't possibly cover everything to do with decolonizing Canada in one book. But this book is very much about, let's really start to have the conversation. Even if we didn't cover it in this book, let's have the conversation if you want to about what this is and what this could look like. Because I don't have the answers, and I don't think, perhaps Phyllis does, but I don't think she has all of the answers. I think it's something we have to learn and walk the path together and learn together.
And we do have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Bonjour, Ndinwe, Maganadok, Nijadishma, Bik. Ogimagabo Indigo. Colin Reed and Dishnakas. Titipinozi Binga, Shkuniganinga, and Domji. Neo Guidoing. There is a from Treaty 4, Rolling River Reserve. I'm an intergenerational survivor of the residential school. In 1966, when my grandfather was chief, because he suffered trauma from World War II, he was chief of Rolling River and he blew his head off with a Winchester. I heard of the stories of the nuns forcing sex on my great aunties and uncles, all kinds of horror stories. Kids getting their limbs chopped off if they refuse sex to the schoolmasters and buried. So I know these things to be true because I heard them from, and I've sat with our people in different areas in Canada, because I've always sat with our people. Like the people that spoke the language, the people that were ceremonial, the ones that suffered. I was never, I didn't live in Wellington Crescent, so to speak. And I live in the north end of Winnipeg right now. We have a genocide going on with all the methamphetamine, what they call down, the fentanyl, the crack cocaine, the mass incarceration of our youth, the mass unemployment, the lack of numeracy and literacy of the kids where they come off the reserve, they can't compete for jobs. And then the whole structure is favor to foreign workers, even for basic jobs. That's another part of reconciliation. All our chiefs and councils are allowed to steal our money without any accountability. Most people suffer. They all drive $100,000 trucks with SUVs and live like kings where most of our people suffer. And it's the Canadian government that allows that to happen. All these things are because of the Indian Act. We need a total rethink of what's happening. Why is it that it's hard for us to even save our languages? Like, because I'm a second speaker of my language, but I can write it, I can read it. But we have no open transmission of our language. It's just allowing it to die, and there's no. But part of that is the entrenched language. It's not just, and that's just a legacy of residential schools. The residential is the language same, and because all of my reserves, like my reserve and other reserves I hear of, all it is a few families that gang up, steal money from a band office. Most people live in poverty. There's a drug crisis on a lot of the reserves. It's a genocide that's still happening. And it's even worse in some ways than my grandfather and my mom's generation. At least they had their language and their culture to buttress them, a lot of those people. The kids now, they can't even read or write in English. They're so excluded from society on so many different levels. Like the only reason why I had a university degree is because my mom got one in the 70s. She was an Anishinaabe Quay. And I'm proud to say that I'm a Bill C-31 Indian because she was part of Bill C-31. Because I was born without status because of a racist, sexist law. But she was part of that, and she even got shooed away from security one time when she was going after Justin Trudeau's dad there. So what I'm saying is when it comes to reconciliation, it's the residential school, but there's so many facets of racism that are there, like mass policing, like when I live in the North End, things have to escalate till there's charges laid. Like, But if you utter a threat over one of these neighborhoods here, the police will be there in 2 seconds and arrest you. So there's a whole different way of policing. All our wealth is being stolen. They allow these token puppets in the Indian Act to steal our money. There's a reason why they're called Okimakanek. And Khan means pretend. It's the same in mosquito mowing is what we call Cree language. There's a reason why they're called that, because the elders knew that they became political eunuchs once we lost our right to govern ourselves. That they became political eunuchs, like they're ineffectual at that time. My grandpa had to follow the Indian agent, the pastors and everything. Sometimes had to bury his bundle because my grandfather ran the sundances and the Dalen ceremonies. My family. So it's kind of hard to think about all this reconciliation stuff and then the extreme lateral violence because of the wealth imbalances within the First Nations communities, because there's and then a lot of it I just find it's just like performative grandstanding. Like when they talk about that landfill, they spent $40 million to search it, but they never helped the women while they're in poverty. It's always these performative stunts that's like a mask and real reconciliation. It's just it's not substantive. It's just like it's not. It doesn't say. It seems it rings really hollow to me. And the genocide is even worse now. I'm reporting for the North End and North Central because that's where I live. It's real.
Good, Stan. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, well, it is 8 o'clock, and there were other questions. Perhaps you have the opportunity to speak with Kristy and Phyllis if you'd like to purchase a book and have continue the conversation. But I really want to thank all of you for being here, Kristy and Phyllis for traveling. Welcome. Thank you, and congratulations again on a fantastic book. I hope that this sparks more conversations going forward as the work continues, and hopefully this will continue to be a guide for people as they find their own healing and journey of decolonization. So thank you very much, and I believe, John, folks can line up here. We're going to do the signing right to my right.
Yes, indeed. I'll have some exciting notes about that in just a moment.
Okay.
No, huge thanks to all of you for being here, for your patience, for your comments, and for sharing. We will be moving along to the signing portion in just a moment. So there will be a moment of chaos while everybody gets in line right down here. We'll have Kristy and Phyllis right at this table. If you are interested in any of Phyllis's other books, they are available just on display on that table there. So we'll move that cart out of the way as well. And if you're looking for anything in particular, please do come find me and I'll make sure that we get it into your hands. We're so enormously grateful to Métis and Wheel Publishing for everything they've done around this event tonight and for publishing this book. To Sean for guiding us through this conversation as well, Sean Carleton. Please join me one more time in acknowledging, of course, Kristy McLeod and Phyllis Webstad.